Well, I read PPE here in 1972. And I didn't intend to become an actor at the time. I did a certain amount of acting with the Howards. And there was a company called the Oxford and Cambridge Shakespeare Company, founded on the safe assumption that you could sell anything to the Americans if it had Oxford and Cambridge and Shakespeare in the title. And we used to tour the USA. The one adjective that was probably missing was royal. And I was involved in a couple of productions there with obviously actors, young undergraduate and graduate actors from the two universities, and often directed by distinguished directors. John Madden, who's now become a fairly distinguished film director, Brian Gilbert similarly, Elijah Mashinsky. After leaving university, my hope was to get into journalism. And for a while I worked as a sub-editor in a magazine in London. I also worked at a news broadcast reporting agency. But if truth be told, I was being bored into a light coma in those jobs. And the best recent memory was doing the theatre tour of the States with the Oxford and Cambridge Shakespeare Company, which I also had run in my last year, together with a man called Andrei Tashinsky, who is now making a mint, producing Matilda. I then had to make a decision eventually whether to stay with journalism or to switch to theatre. I was offered a job in the West End, and for a while I was able to do both jobs. I'd got in those days you had to have an equity card to work professionally, and there was a bit of a catch-22. You couldn't get an equity card unless you had a job. You couldn't get a job unless you had an equity card. But one way in was to do theatre in education, which suited me because it seemed to combine a kind of social mission as well as an opportunity to develop some more theatre skills. So that's how I got my entree into the profession. Thereafter, I was, in my case, I was always rather keen to belong. And I had some hopes of joining an ensemble, and the ensemble I wanted to join was the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I did manage to get cast in some of their productions, and surprisingly, and indeed astonishingly for a first-time actor with the company, I was not players cast, with the so-called spear carriers. I actually got in to play Aaron the Moor in Titus Andronicus, and a couple of other named roles. At that time, the company was being run by Trevor Nunn and Terry Hands, and Trevor became something of an ally in that he asked me to understudy the role of Hotspur in the production of Henry IV, Part 1. Hotspur was being played by an actor called Timothy Dalton, who then went on to play James Bond. And no one had realized that he was going to be leaving before the end of his, before the production transferred from Stratford to the Barbican. It was the first production to open the Barbican. So it was Trevor Nunn who decreed that his understudy should go on, namely me, which I think caused it raised some eyebrows, caused a certain amount of consternation, because I think both within the company and outside the company, because Hotspur was, of course, a historical role. Indeed, I had been at Christchurch with his direct descendant, Harry Percy. We'd been on the same staircase in Meadows. He was blonde, almost an albino, but I decided not to play it like that. I played it creditably well, I believe, and one reviewer came back and reviewed the production again and gave me a very favourable review. I thought I had done enough to warrant an extension to the contract, to be invited to stay. But what happened was that at the end of the season, despite my glowing review, I got a postcard in the internal mail saying, thanks for all your sterling work, but we don't have, there's nothing for it. Your agent and the RSC have discussed this, we don't have anything for you, so perhaps we'll see you sometime in the future. And that was that. I have to admit, I was a bit despondent. And for the first time, and it would not be the last time, I did wonder about the wisdom of becoming an actor. But I've persevered and joined other companies, the Royal Exchange Theatre Company, got a few films under my belt, and then was invited back to the RSC to do some interesting roles. There was a very rather colourful and dynamic production of Romeo and Juliet, in which Sean Bean played Romeo, I played Tybalt. One of the Cusack sisters played... have a drink, now you overdid it. Or played Julia. Michael Bogdanov, the late Michael Bogdanov, directed it. And it was a modern dress production. I drove onto the stage in an Alfa Romeo Spider and wore a black leather suit and fought with a Bali song, Butterfly Knife and a Chain, which I whirled artfully around my head. There were quite a few black actors in that company. The first time I joined the RSC, there were only 2 black actors. The second time, there were maybe 6 or 7. One reviewer, a man called Robert Gore Langton, I haven't forgotten this, or him, remarked there were enough black actors on the stage to spark off a mini race riot in provincial Italy. And for that reason alone, he took issue with the decision to cast in that way. So throughout that period, there was a growing awareness and a growing debate about what they call colorblind casting, non-traditional casting. And the RSC, to their great credit, was always in the forefront of that kind of casting, indeed still are. If any of you saw Hamlet recently with Papa Esiedu, and indeed the Othello that I did 2 years ago, where Iago was also black, played by Lucien Mzamati. So the RSC, under Trevor Nunn, and certainly under Michael Boyd and under Greg Doran, has always championed this. That said, there is an issue with career building, the choices that it's possible to make as an actor. And there is, in my opinion, still a bias towards looks. You will, by and large, fare better in this profession if you're blonde, blue-eyed, and beautiful. I'm not saying that being black and brown-eyed is necessarily a bar, but there will be fewer opportunities, fewer choices. And there have been, I think, 3 or 4 crises, and I use that word to mean what it should mean, namely a point of decision, where I have thought it's time to give up. And before I get much older, I really should do something else. Not least because it's difficult to plan. It can be difficult to earn a healthy income. Some of us have managed it, but not many. And more recently, it's become an issue about whether the theatrical canon and the theatrical tradition of which I wanted to become a part is really where I should be and what I should be doing. At one point, I remember Trevor Nunn saying to me, "You really should be playing Macbeth, not playing a doctor on television." And I thought, no. What I should be doing is what I am doing, namely working, making money, providing for my family. I question increasingly whether the classical theatre is, and the conventions of the classical theatre are something that I should respect, or whether they are conventions that I should challenge. And I think the great regret that I have is in having been complacent, having been passive, You see, when I was a young actor, the conventional wisdom was that black actors, by and large, couldn't speak English with a British accent. You know, you often have the West Indian accent mocked, or the West African accent mocked. The emphasis would be on the wrong word. So I blithely thought that speaking as I do, I was going to clean up. But it didn't quite happen like that, because I think there was a realization actually that there was a sort of an authentic black British voice, and those who spoke like me were not representative of that authentic black Britishness. So, you know, you've seen it, I think, with actors like Idris Elba, Ashley Walters, to an extent, that people who do not sound as if they've been through have come down from the ivory towers of privilege. Excuse me. So, in my case, I think that what I regret was not having tried to initiate projects and start my own company or make my own films. And a little bit like the actors. I didn't go to drama school, by the way, but there was a sense that your career would largely be determined by certainly by your talent and your agent, but increasingly by your looks. I'll just finish by. I just remembered a little detail. I once auditioned for the BBC Radio Rep and prepared a few audition pieces, and one of which was from the Simon Gray play called The Rear Column, which I'd seen and greatly enjoyed, in a production I think Harold Pinter had directed. And it was about the three men left behind by Stanley when he went off in search of Livingstone. And I did a little monologue from that, and they were, the people in the panel were very complimentary, but there was a certain air of puzzlement about them, because I suddenly realized that there were any number of white British actors who could play that. But I suspect what they were looking to me, what they were looking for from me was something that those white British actors couldn't do, namely put them in touch with a black experience, a black voice. So in a sense, there was always going to be a built-in institutional, not racism, but bias. You know, a good black actor would be expected to play Othello, Aaron the Moor. And it will raise eyebrows if a good black actor plays Iago, or, as I intend to one day, Shylock. But so, do you see what I'm saying? That when you become an actor, of course it's going to be possible to break the mold, but you often have to address the sense that you're challenging and indeed defying a convention, and perhaps refusing to take part in the tradition. I'll stop there for now. We can resume later.
Hello everyone, so I'm Effie. My background is, I didn't go to Oxford, but I went to the University of Surrey and I studied media technology because I always wanted to work in television and just be part of production. So after I finished my degree, my first job was at MTV, which was a dream for me. Music is life, and so being able to film and meet all these amazing artists was everything, and I felt at home. It was a wonderful internship, and I was able to travel and just film like people from Beyonce to meeting David Beckham, which was absolute joy in a moment. And and it was quite diverse, and there was such a great community in it. And then after that, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, so I touched upon acting just slightly, just so I could relearn. The next thing that I did was actually go into becoming a receptionist, because I didn't really know, and I'm sure when you guys finish here, there may be a point where you're not quite sure what you want to do. And I actually fell into my next job, which was in advertising. And I became one of the youngest advertising assistants in the company. It's probably one of the biggest advertising companies, if not in the UK, but in the world. And I didn't realise what an undertaking that was, and the transition that it would mean for not only myself as a young black female to go into a heavily dominated area where I wasn't represented really, and do it at such a young age. And the response that I would get from being in that environment was, on one hand, great, because I knew that I had to break barriers and challenges, but on the other side, realised that people didn't feel that I deserved to be there. I wasn't in the right spot or the right place, and I had to really earn everything. So even, you know, a lot of young people say, yeah, we're here till, you know, I used to start work at 7 and not finished until 9 o'clock, or finish at 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what countries and who I was working with, the various different brands, and a lot of the stuff that I used to hear. That I remember being in one of my first meetings and hearing that black people weren't aspirational. And so we couldn't really cast anybody of any ethnicity in one of the first mobile ads that I did. And it was heartbreaking, but then I knew that's why I needed to be there. So I could go into those meetings and I could have that voice, and they could see that, you know what, I'm going to be the one casting your adverts. You know what, I'm going to put every single type of person in there, all right? So regardless of what your casting brief is, because it was always very specific, and it also alerted me to brands and the way, you know, if you don't see yourself in it, may it be women, may it be gay people or LGBT, whoever it is, don't buy from them, because they have their agenda, they know who they want to sell to. And so I became very savvy about the way that I presented myself and what I needed to deliver to not only the buying public, but to my bosses, to the creators that I worked with, because it will all go against you, may it be colour or your race, or, you know, I wasn't class, I'm from Hackney, you know, so you can hear my Cockney accent, and that is what I didn't hear around. But you know what, I was comfortable in that. It took me some time. So I stayed as a full-time employee at one advertising agency. I learned everything that I needed to know. Sometimes I was a bit, as you said, passive in the way when people would talk to me and address me. And maybe they didn't even realise it was a subconscious thing, that sometimes that they would be speaking down to me or speaking to everybody in the room except me, not giving me the opportunity to voice my opinions and my creativity in the most powerful way that I could. But you know what, that was cool, because I was learning how to deal with people, and then realising how, when I learned how to deal with people, they'd learn how to respect me in whatever field I went into. So I carried on, and then I went on to become a freelance TV producer. And I found that the industry as a whole does not represent anyone who isn't from a certain ilk, or, you know, doesn't speak a certain language or has a certain education. And a lot of it is networks, and very powerful networks. And so again, for me, it was about, when I was in those, making sure that I'd get someone who wanted to do work experience, who would never get an opportunity to shadow me. I'd make sure that, again, with castings, directors that I'd put in front of my creative directors would be so off the scale. And I remember I did one, and it was in for an ad for Los Angeles. I gave it to my senior producer, and then everybody was like, oh my God, it's brilliant. And I didn't get any credit for it, but you know what, it just made me happy that I'd put someone who was of the subculture and, you know, not part of who they'd really visualise and see producing an ad. So that's, for me, it was, for me, I'm not here to tell any sad stories, go, oh, it's me, and I'm underprivileged, and I've done that. That's not my style. For me, it's about, right, I'm here. How can I make a change? How am I going to make a difference? Who are you going to see when you see me? And yeah, you may see my colour, great. If you do, good for you. I love that. Why should you? I don't want you to be colourblind. I want you to see it. I want you to, you know, really be there with it. I want you to see my gender, because that's amazing. To be a woman, it's a great thing. All right, you know, to know that I'm from the East End of London, even that is, for me, it's the best thing. I had a single parent mum. Yes, that's my superpower. All right. So, you know, everything that I've achieved and attained, because I'm not in advertising. There was one day I just thought, no, I'm bored of being the only one. It's such a boring story. I've done it now. I'm going to give the helm to somebody else, and I'm ready to start and create my own business. so that I have the power to go in, because I'm a youth mentor now, and that's what I do every day. I have the joy of working all over the country and soon the world to educate young people from the ages of 4. I spent a wonderful day at primary school working with 900 children, teaching them about love and confidence and communication to 25-year-olds and beyond. And I can go in there. There are many places in our great country where they don't get to be educated by women and black women, and I get the power of doing that and having that influence over them, and hopefully it's a positive one that they will hold in their hearts, so the next time that anyone comes in, regardless of what they are, they give them a helping hand. So for me, that is what it's about. So hopefully I've made my mark in the media, now it's ready to make my mark in education, which is probably one of the greatest things that you can do. So thank you for inviting me here. I know we haven't finished yet, but I'm so excited. So yeah, sorry, you can carry on with your questions.
Thank you, that was both really interesting. I noticed that you both mentioned representation and feeling represented as a kind of way of reaching out to people. And do you think, I mean, you mentioned in terms of education that you're making your mark in education. Do you think this representation helps to kind of fuel that?
It's one of the most important things. Not only having that great representation, what is the message that you're bringing behind that representation? What is the, our most powerful thing, maybe social media, or just the media at itself? What has already laid the mark for, especially for young people, about who they're seeing and what's coming into their lives? So if I can either give them an alternative to that, or be something that they've never ever seen before, or just them being able to ask me questions about my life, because I'm very open about who I am and what I do, then you know what, that's the greatest things that I could give them. Especially being a Nigerian woman and with rootage, and also coming from a background which, again, I hate words like, poor or you haven't, underprivileged or whatever they want to label you. It's boring to me. They'll see a woman, someone who may have started here but transgressed to here, and progression is all in your mind. So I'm representing a progressive, powerful woman who can change a lot of people's lives or change their thinking on their life, and representation and identity is everything. So yeah.
Effie has the edge over me because I think I get the sense that you've always been had a much clearer sense of who you are, of identity. But with me, it was a little bit more problematic. Given that I think for each of us, there's always a sort of a negotiation to be made between what you think you are and what you think you ought to be. I don't know whether this corresponds to the Freudian idea of the ego deciding between the id and the superego. That's not for me to say. I'm not a psychologist, but nevertheless, there's from early on. My mother was quite pious, quite religious, and so from childhood, whether we wanted to or not, we were sent to church on Sunday and Sunday school, and there was this group of Sunday school club for boys called the Crusaders, and they had a really cool little ceramic badge with a sword on it. So I want one of those. So I joined this group of the Crusaders, and being the only black boy there, it was never made explicit, but I very soon felt a kind of an awareness that the man who was head of this group was constantly looking around the corner of his eyes to see whether I was taking it in, whether I was absorbing the Christian message and so on. I didn't stick with it. I left after a couple of sessions, I think. And similarly, being sent away to the boarding school, and the experience continually of being one of a very few, if not the only black kid there. And at Christchurch, when I was there in '72, in my matriculation photograph, there are 2 black faces. I'm right in the middle, in the front row with my afro, next to a member of the Guinness family, I think, and possibly an earl or a duke on the other side. And the other black face was directly above me, in 3rd row. He was also a Ghanaian, a Rhodes Scholar. Perfect symmetry, you see in the photograph. They thought about this. And again, there was that sense of trying to demonstrate that I had the know-how, the savoir-faire, that I knew which way the port went around the table, and what sconcing meant and all that kind of guff. And in acting, there's also the sense, too, perhaps, of knowing what the conventions of performance were. I have to say that I think undergraduate acting in those days was pretty poor. We all tended to try to emulate, if not copy, the prevailing styles of the day. Thank you. So that we would, in the plays that were put on, the modern and the classical, we were just perpetuating the acting that looked like acting, And I was as adept at that as anybody else. I could reel off a speech of Shakespeare in a breath, and all the facial expressions that accompanied it. And after a while, after a few years, I have to admit, you think, oh, what the fuck are you doing? This is acting that looks like acting. You're doing things that only actors do. And on top of that, you're doing things that, by and large, only white actors do. By that kind of thing, I mean, have you ever seen anybody raise an eyebrow like that? Apart from Roger Moore? Sorry, that's Roger Moore. That's Sean Connery. But there were certain things, certain traits behaviourally that when you want to convey emotion, the flaring nostrils, the heaving chest, the catch in the voice. We kind of know all these behavioural tricks, but actually the thing that moves you is something that you realise after a while is something that makes you aware that, wow, that didn't look like acting to me. That looked real. So it's a question of, and I should add that sometimes if you don't respect the conventions, it might appear that you don't know how to act. I'll just give you a little illustration. The last time I was at the ROC, and I think it will be the last time, I was, having spent about 12 years doing a continuing drama called Holby City. And you don't do that without acquiring a certain approach to performance. It is generally fatal if you look like you're acting on screen, if you do something that is utterly artificial and rehearsed. And I was hoping to bring a similar quality of naturalness, if you like, behavioral naturalness, to the role of Othello on stage. After the third preview, the voice department, one of the teachers in the voice department just said, "Can I give you a note, darling? Don't forget that you've got to play, you've got to take them all in up there. You've got to include them in everything. Because we don't want them saying, 'Alas, my lord, why do you speak so faintly and so soft, do we, darling?'" So on the fourth preview, I was trying to play their note and was being expansive and giving it large. And inexplicably, I messed up the last famous speech, the one which begins, "Then must you speak of one that loved not wisely but too well, or one not easily jealous but being wrought, perplexed in the extreme." And I swapped the lines around. And I was aware of myself doing this, and the voice in my head said, "What just happened?" And I was aware when it happened because I was not in the zone, so to speak. I was not playing the moment or the character. I was playing the note. So I let it be known quietly to the stage management that, would you please tell the voice department that if anybody attempts to give me another note, I will stab them in the eye. Leave me alone, I'll get there. And I did get there. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes, particularly in the classical canon, there are conventions of performance. Peter Hall is positively pharisaical when it comes to laying down the law about how verse should be spoken. The high rising terminal at the end, respect the line, don't ignore the punctuation. If it's monosyllables, then it's then it means that you take your time with it, you don't rush through the line. There are various rules. And there are conventions, of course, in modern plays as well, in modern scripts. And these, in a Holby City script, for example, it's, I think, fair to say that these are scripts written not by doctors, not by anybody with any deep medical knowledge, but written by people who've watched a lot of television. So they know the conventions, they know the story points. It's written in, it's quite often acted in. You know, actors know when to kind of do all that, you know, or maybe not that so much. And if it's not acted in, it's quite often directed in. A director will say, I need that story beat, you know, regardless of whether it's consistent with what you've established in previous episodes. We need that story beat because we've got a major storyline coming up. So the conventions can be quite limiting. They give structure, if you will, but at the same time they can be quite restrictive. And you have to decide throughout whether what you're doing is true, whether you believe it, or whether you're simply honouring the convention. And if you are, is the convention based on truth or is it not? You know, and I think for a black actor that can be quite a tricky negotiation. Just briefly, I mean, I had, excuse me, I'm very dry today. I had always resisted playing Othello because I'm not sure that it is I had written a pamphlet which became, to my surprise and delight, widely read, called Second Thoughts about Othello, questioning whether black actors should play it, given that it was a role which was written by a white Englishman 400 years ago, and it had been played by white British or white actors since then. And I was worried that if a black actor did play it, whether it would just reinforce what I took to be the racist assumptions within the conventions, the literary conventions, and the theatrical traditions of the play. My conclusion, by the way, was yes, black actors should play it, because only by so doing could we challenge those conventions. But there's the worry for me, as I say, is that there is a set of conventions which govern the depiction of black men within the classical theatre. It's not just Shakespeare. I read other plays of the period, the Battle of Alcazar, the Mooley Hammett, the Stukely plays. Generally speaking, whenever a black man appeared on stage, it heralded some kind of threat, some kind of menace to the established order, politically, sexually, just, you know, religiously, if you like. So there is a real sense that while it's important to demonstrate your understanding of how what the convention is, there are times when it might be, you might be beholden just actually say, this is the convention, I'm going to ignore it. And by and large, that's probably true of you know, other areas of life, you know, that you get to somewhere, say the Premier League, how many black Premier League managers are there? I think there's one now, Chris Hughton has just been promoted from Brighton, you know, but despite the number, the preponderance of brilliant black players, very few black managers in government. I don't think there are any black members of Theresa May's current cabinet, I may be wrong. Oh, in Whitehall, I don't know how many black senior civil servants there are. So there's always that sense of having to balance fitting in with challenging, do you see? And I think for me, fortunately, there has been that has been accelerated. There's in this whole superhero franchise, we've had now Wonder Woman, and soon after we're going to get the Black Panther, played by Chadwick Boseman, and interesting, written by a very interesting African-American writer called Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think he's been, I'm not sure whether he did the script. Vicky, you'll probably know, but you don't.
He did the script, he wrote the comic.
He wrote the comic book, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it has, I think, has it
He's
not
been
been?
involved.
Yeah, but has it not been directed by a black woman?
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be directed by Eva DuVernay, but I don't think it has been. But I think
It hasn't been.
Okay. But anyway, the point being that there is a realization, A, that this needs to happen, something that is, if you like, a corrective, and B, also that there is a market for it, because ultimately our industries are always about the bottom line.
It is.
You know, and people will only do something if it's going to make money. They won't do it if they. I mean, I'm always delighted when I see the mixed race couple on the sofa in the DFS adverts. You know, but they've obviously targeted that particular demographic. But let me pause there.
I think that's really interesting because this kind of idea of converging and diverging from conventions that are kind of predetermined by white establishments and white actors. How do you feel that this relates to performing or writing or advertising as a kind of from the point of a minority ethnicity, like black body or brown body? How do you feel that this plays into it?
Well, I think watching some of the films that came out in the BAFTA season, there was one called, for example, The Birth of a Nation, which was the story of Nat Turner. It was a deliberately provocative title because, of course, the original Birth of a Nation was made by D.W. Griffiths and was unashamedly racist in its depiction of black people. In fact, it had a white actor in blackface makeup. And it told the story, I don't know whether you've seen it, but it told the story of the heroic Ku Klux Klan and how they'd emerged to protect the honor of white women who were threatened after the Civil War by boorish black men who were eating chicken and putting their bare feet up on the benches of the state legislature. And by the way, I think it was the first motion picture to be shown at the White House at the behest of Woodrow Wilson, who I think was sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan, may even have been a Klan member himself. And certainly it did boost Klan membership. So the last Birth of a Nation, and the story of Nat Turner previously had only been told by the white novelist William Styron, who also wrote Sophie's Choice and Nat Turner's Confessions. So this was a film very deliberately trying to reappropriate the story of Nat Turner, making him out to be the black folk hero that he was. There are countless other stories yet to be told, I think. An increasing number that are now being told. Hidden Figures is an obvious example. And of course, Selma, and the butler, you know, yeah, the butler, yeah. But you know, but there was still the Seretse Khama story. But there are still many other stories, and they don't all have to be about black history. But just accept that hitherto the black involvement in historical episodes has been airbrushed out, or has been ignored, or just sometimes plain falsified. I'll give you just a snapshot example. Have you had time to think yet? Okay. There was in France. There was a man called Georges Duxon, who was known as Le Lion du 17e. He was a resistance fighter. He was Congolese in origin. And he was a very effective resistance fighter. And when the pictures of General de Gaulle walking down the Champs-Élysées, in the unedited photographs of that procession down the Champs-Élysées, there's Georges Duxon walking alongside him, his shirt torn, because he'd been in a fight again with the Germans. Subsequent photographs, he's been edited out. Nobody knows about Georges Duxon unless they want to bother to go and have a look. Because he was never recognized and never rewarded, he resorted to a life of crime and was shot during a bank robbery. But that kind of detail, or the numerous West African soldiers, both Nigerian and Ghanaian, who fought with General Slim in Burma, that story is hardly been told. You can call a film Notting Hill Gate, but only have one brief black character in it. Played by Clark Peters, as I recall. So there is a sense in which the old assumption that if you put a black model on the cover of Vogue magazine, sales would drop. But I think that's clearly been disproved by Naomi Campbell and countless other models. So there are operational assumptions which have to be questioned. When William McPherson talked about the institutional racism of the Metropolitan Police, I thought it was a clever phrase to use, because you had to think, what does he mean by that? Nobody quite knew what he meant. But it became clear that what he was talking about was the operational assumptions that police officers made. Even though an individual police officer could say, some of my best mates are black, I play football down here every weekend with them. But when you see a black youth in a hoodie, you make an assumption about it. When you see a black man in first class, you want to check his ticket. So there are operational assumptions to be made in our industry, and clearly something that Effie's been doing, and doing it far sooner than I did, and I applaud you for it.
My view is, again, like you said, being edited out. That can't happen now when you have your own platform. And we have things like YouTube, we have our Instagrams, we have all this wonderful social medias where now all young people, or anybody, I'm not just because that's who I work with on a daily basis, but everybody has the power to then tell your own story, make your own films, do your own personal advertising for what you care about, talk about different dramas or your education. Do you know how many young girls, where are your family from? India, all right? So my best friend's Indian, and she wants to be in beauty, and I said, do you know how great your market is for what you want to do? You alone, young lady, is setting a precedent for all the young girls who maybe with Indian backgrounds don't think they're going to make it into Oxford. Wow, what a story you have to tell, So right now is an epic time, because I love Drake, and he says, what a time to be alive, where you can start creating news stories. Back in the day, we didn't have this power that we have now. All of you have such an incredible amount of power for you to start revising what the textbooks told us about who we should be, how we should be, how we should be represented, what our identity is, how we should put ourselves in this group of people. I don't want to belong to that tribe anymore. I've got my own tribe, and I can tell my own story just the way I want to, how I want to, in the best way possible, in the way that shows me such a gleaming light. You can't dispel that. All right, and you can say whatever you want, but the evidence is here, it's online or wherever it wants to go, and you can claim that and leave a legacy for other people who are watching, reading, listening to it. So it's been a shame, and there are various institutional racism or isms wherever you go, however you want to call it or term it. But now we do personally have your own power to tell a story, and there's so many people who want to be engaged in that story and then start telling their stories. It creates such a wonderful book and tapestry of information, knowledge and expertise.
Can I add to that? It seems to me that the music industry is leaps and bounds ahead of the performing of the theatre industry and the TV industry, because so much of the music industry, of course, is of black origin. So you have to kind of respect that. But the concern is when you mentioned an Indian friend who wants to get into the beauty industry, that I think we know that there are so many black women in particular who will use skin lightening creams, but to make themselves perhaps look or get them closer to the beauty aesthetic, which is usually associated with light-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed people. And by extension, it's interesting that when black performers, particularly in my profession, have emerged, they quite often have demonstrated their facility with language, with verse, with manners too, sometimes, and with dress sense, that someone like I like his suits. Don't get me wrong, but Oswald, well, in fact, he's called Boateng, but in Ghana it would be Boateng. But it was like Paul Boateng is now Lord Boateng. So, and there's a kind of acceptance. Well, that's the way that it's pronounced over here. But the embracing of the suit, the slimline suit, and particularly for people who look like Maasai warriors, as opposed to people who look like dwarves from Lord of the Rings. There's a sense in which, having become eminent, we then assimilate in its entirety the prevailing aesthetic, the prevailing conventions. We get on message very, very quickly. And it's so revealing, and it's a release when you go back, as I did recently, to Ghana, and realize that actually there are things that just make no sense if you try and do things the Western way. What I'm saying is that after a while, the sense of release when you actually stop trying to assimilate a Western aesthetic or Western convention, it is like taking off a pair of tight shoes at the end of the day and thinking, oh, why didn't I do that sooner? Stop trying to be or to assimilate and emulate something which ultimately doesn't necessarily speak to you, and actually just enjoy the fact that there are possibilities which were hitherto clouded. Just as a peroration, I'll add that when I can recite column inches of Alexander Pope and yards of Shakespeare. But so what, is my question. I recently gave a talk to a cultural society in Taunton, and I flashed up at the end of the lecture a picture of the man, the great writer, who supposedly died on the same day as Shakespeare himself. Actually, it wasn't quite the same day because they were using a different calendar. The Gregorian as opposed to Julian. And I asked people there, do you know who that was? And they said, was it Marlowe? Is it Ford? Is it Middleton? No, it was Cervantes, who was considered to be the father of the modern novel. I think one or two might have read Don Quixote or seen the musical Man of La Mancha. But what's interesting to me is that Shakespeare is such a monolithic institution that he casts a shadow on other artists. And actually, if you peer around the monolith, it is rewarding. You can encounter other artists, other people, and other ways of thinking, which mean that you can get off the railroad of Shakespeare and Western literature. And as an artist of African origin, I now have to engage in what I call a kind of cultural triage. I've got a limited amount of time left. Am I going to read Tristram Shandy, or am I going to read Chinua Achebe? I'm not, and I've tried to do both, but I'm a slow reader. So I'm going to have to prioritize. Am I going to read Proust, or am I going to read Shelley? In that case, I'm going to read Proust. But do you see what I mean? There's a sense in which we have been perhaps educated, arguably miseducated, to see ourselves in a certain way, to prioritize certain values. In fact, I recently started reading a book, which is a little pamphlet which was written in the 1930s called The Miseducation of the Negro. You know, which somebody Carter Goodwin, I think. And I stopped after about 3 chapters because they pretty much repeat themselves. It makes it doesn't do the Negro any good to read Spencer's The Fairy Queen, but much more to find out by something else. But ultimately, that kind of triage, that kind of questioning, I guess is what you will be doing here. I mean, who you were talking about, Mukherjee, who's this tutor who's taking a very post-colonial and anti-traditional view of Western literature. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, I think, does similarly. And Shashi Tharoor, who was one of Kofi Annan's advisors, or might even been a deputy Secretary General at the UN, who's just published his book Inglorious Empire, challenging the notion of the legacy of the British Empire. And increasingly we realise that actually, not that we've been conned, but that we've been encouraged to go down a certain route, but actually that thing over there, that might have been as interesting, if not more interesting. And so the more that we can, I think, challenge the conventions, the more that we will free up other opportunities, and to create new art forms, create new work, I hope.
So I think that, I mean, in Oxford itself, the drama scene seems like quite white dominated. I just saw Henry IV Part 1 and Coriolanus the same week. No BAME students on stage. And I guess we think of drama as telling a story, telling relatable stories, whether fictional or real. How do you think that genre plays into it? How do you think that kind of, if we're telling a historical fiction, there are specific roles tied to the black identity, the kind of a brown actor, and how do you think that this kind of challenging convention plays into different genres?
I mean, you know, it's interesting that this term, cultural appropriation, has become quite commonly these days, and that's partly why it's very difficult currently for a white actor to contemplate playing Othello. There is, I hope the time will come when that passes, because there are certain white actors that would just relished Simon Callow's Othello, can't you see? No, I'm being a bit flippant, but I think it's interesting that even in the so-called history genre, the sense of history is being challenged, and sometimes quite perfectly legitimately. I know that in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, surprisingly, the men of Sherwood Forest spoke with American accents, and they managed to work in Morgan Freeman. But actually, that's quite valid. There were black Moors who crossed sides. In Merlin, you've got a few knights of the Round Table who are of a darker complexion than usual. I think this is all to the good. But as I say, the thing is that the genres do seem to have their own conventions of interpretation and of performance. So even when you do get say a black hotspur, forget that one for a moment. Let's just talk about what was current a while ago. Will there be a black James Bond? And this caused a lot of merriment amongst the brethren, because the idea was, well, No, they never were, because if there were, James Bond could never drive an Aston Martin Avantage because he'd be stopped every 15 minutes. And he'd never drink vodka martini shaken, not stirred. I'm doing it with anybody's tried one, it's an awful drink. Not even Ian Fleming liked it. And I know this from having read some of his letters at a public event. No, a black actor would one of my colleagues at Don Julie would say, give me a rare nephew. That to extent is perhaps playing to a black stereotype. But again, it does make you think, what would a black James Bond look like? How would he behave? Would there be any sense that he deliberately wouldn't be walking around in an Oswald Boateng suit when they're driving an Aston Martin or a Lotus? But if you want to be an undercover secret agent, then you would drive around in the back of an old white van or a 10-year-old BMW. But you wouldn't play to that stereotype. So the genre is kind of based on, it's very masculine, but it is a kind of old-fashioned masculinity, isn't it? It's got to be, they departed radically from the idea of a tall, saturnine James Bond with dark hair, and into this kind of slightly wiry, doesn't scrub up well with Daniel Craig currently champions. But the time may well come that they do have a black Bond, and as and when they do that, I hope that they'll allow them to eat jollof rice and not some canapé, and also allow them to drink something other than vodka martini, maybe Schmürner vodka, which is not the best one. So yeah, I mean, a genre, in as far as a genre has its own conventions, the conventions can be quite restrictive, I think. Certainly in the classical theatre, certainly in historical drama, and even in the spy thriller. I mean, there was a couple of films made called XXX or Triple X. The first one with Vin Diesel, I think. And they were made, as I recall, the first one began with a middle-aged, sophisticated white guy at a bar wearing a white tuxedo, smoking a cigar in a very elegant way, and then being killed, being shot, which marked the death of James Bond, if you see what I mean. And the reason they cast Daniel Craig, I think, was because of the Bourne movies, primarily. You couldn't really go back to the Roger Moore style of delivery after the Bourne movies, which was so gritty, particularly Paul Greengrass productions. They had to be based on something a little bit more real. They become terribly Freudian and inward-looking, maybe. With Blofeld being his half-brother. What's that about? Who cares? You want fast cars, but so you have to be careful about the conventions within each genre. But there is, it must always be remembered that we are involved in selling an idea of something, an image, and if you can extend that image so that Lancelot could be black, Doctor Who could be black, or James Bond could be black, or indeed a woman, then it does actually allow the imagination greater room for scope, and also which is out to a much bigger market for action.
And how do you think this relates to advertising? Because I feel like if you do cast a black or brown person in a role, predominantly white, traditionally, it is always a statement. So how do you think this relates to advertising genres or TV?
Yeah, it's always going to be a big statement, but I just think if you've got to remember it's clients that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So whatever their agenda or the prescription is, or who they feel their biggest target market or audience for, because it's all about economics, then that's what we have to go for. There's a brand that I know, and they will only use Caucasian women with brunette hair. They will not be diverse from any other woman. And it pains me knowing that that's the only option that I have ever had to cast with. At the end of the day, I do believe that change is imminent because everything is in great cycle and also creation. So for me, I believe that if we're open to the idea of representing and stating that's what we want, and us as buying public make a decision to how we spend our money and what we want to be seen, because we do have Twitter now. We can say, oh, I really want to see this type of person, or we really want this person represented, or, you know, we're not seeing enough of this person and we're not going to spend our money with you until we do see that type of person there, or you need to be open to change your vision of what you're already presenting to us and have done for 20x amount of years. Then I think everything can change, will change, and has an opportunity to grow and evolve and see more difference.
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging that, what's his name? Effie, just become the first black editor of Vogue magazine.
Oh yeah,
Ghanaian.
Edward Unequal.
Yeah,
Yes.
Unequal.
And it's 2017 that this is about to happen, so I'm celebrating, but half was like, come on people, we are so late, we should be ashamed because this, you know, I'm so proud of him, but I can't keep it up.
But also there's a record number of forgiveness term, BAMEs in Parliament elected recently, and black women. So against that, you still have to remember that there's a kind of easy, casual, lazy racism on the part of people, the class of the entitled class. Boris Johnson, who was very popular within the Tory party, has been talked about as a possible successor to Theresa May. You will recall that it wasn't so long ago that he talked about, explained the Queen's love of the Commonwealth because it provided her an unending supply of grinning pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. If he does become the leader of the Tory party, I'm ready. Now, I have a picture of a grinning pickaninny, and I shall collect every racist statement that he and his entitled class have made, just tweet them periodically, just to remind them that we haven't forgotten. You know, certainly when I was at the House, the Heis rather, there was it wasn't. You know, what just became used to, inured to people talking about, gosh, I feel very much like the nigger in the woodpile, and oh, I've been working like an absolute black. These were sort of throwaway terms. They weren't meant to offend. I'm sure, but there was a kind of unthinking attitude. And it's important to remember why political correctness arose in the first place. It was to challenge these easy assumptions about women, about race, you know, about class. You know, the sense of that which is an accident of history is then seen to be natural and normal, and those assumptions continually have to be challenged. So. It is encouraging that Unequal is in place. It will be much more encouraging when we have, I don't know, someone like Sadiq Khan or Jubilee Williams who the Labour Party. You know, but in the meantime, it will be very encouraging if the Tories see fit to appoint a black member of Parliament. Let's see that happening.
And how much control do you think you can have over this kind of representation? Because in drama itself, the difference between being an actor and being a director, as you mentioned at the start, keeping the kind of you regret not making your own films and productions. How do you think?
Well, certainly the advice that I do give to young actors these days is don't wait for things to happen. Don't wait for it to come to you. You know, get out and make your own movies. You know, even if it's just a student movie, you can borrow the equipment. Quite often they'll let you have it because they want to encourage people to make movies. What's that actor's name? You know, what's his name? Who made Kid Up Hood and No, yes, that's what, yeah. He didn't wait, you know what I mean? He got up to do his own thing. And great to his credit, now that Idris is a name, he's got his own Green Door company. Similarly, Will Smith in the States has got Overbrook going. So, and they are looking for projects which will tell the story of their experience in a way which resonates with them, rather than simply having to demonstrate. You know, they can act just like you know, their white peers. Just by way of illustration, years ago, I went to see. Many years ago, I saw the Harlem, the Dance Theatre of Harlem, a brilliant dance company. They sort of rival, they're up there with the Alvin Ailey company when it comes to dance. But they invariably started their repertoire for the evening by doing a classical routine. The court of ballet, and they were doing pliés and wearing tights and tutus and twirling around. And it was, they did it very well. It was as if what they were trying to say was, look, we can do this shit, all right? We've done it, now we're going to do the stuff that we're really good at. You know, and they got down, they danced the music of Rufus Thomas. And that's what everybody would come to see. But they first needed to demonstrate their mastery of and their ease with the classical, classical idiom. And I think, I hope that now that we've established that there are many of us who can do the classics, that we don't get hung up on it. It's a little disquieting, actually. That, excuse me. I went to every so often BAFTA organise script readings, and 195 Piccadilly in London, and I went to one which had been written by a black female director, actually, of some repute. And her script had white protagonists. There weren't actually any black people in her script. And, you know, it was a brave move on her part, I think. But in the, you know, she quite, I suppose, creditably, she said, I didn't want to feel that I had to tell any particular story. I wanted to tell the story I wanted to tell. But again, you know, this is somebody who I would suggest works in TV and is perhaps well-versed, maybe too well-versed in the conventions of mainstream TV. But if you've got that opportunity, then I think, for now, certainly, probably got to push a different agenda.
Again, I think we can all now stand up and be rebels. We can all create a different story, message, and campaign about what is importantly true to us with regards to all parts and areas of our identity, maybe just from the simple thing of your name to your daily experience of what life is like on campus here, for college, or your education, or how you see your future and your dreams. It's all up to you, really, and so now take the time to, even if it's not you telling a story, go and tell your friend to go and tell a story. Go and, you know, make sure you guys can write in blogs, you can do videos, you can, you know, create such beautiful pieces of art and canvas. So if you don't take the opportunity to do that, you know, don't just leave all your talent to your teachers to read, all right? Because they're not the only ones who want to hear it. They want to hear lots of different things. You've got a beautiful story to tell. I don't know what you're studying, but I'm sure it's great. You've got a wonderful smile and a lovely energy. I don't know, you know, but you have to. So do you, young lady, you know? So we all have it in us. We all need to take the time now, you know, even you sir, make sure, you know, that happens. You can goody your jumper. You know, for me, it is, we've all got greatness in us, and if we do not share that, then that's a shame in our life, and especially now we have all the technology and platforms to do it. It's such a wonderful, unique, and interesting and engaging and quick way. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to tell long stories. Hi, my day was this, like I will do on the way home. I was off to university, they wanted me, girl from Hackney, I was with Hugh, Hugh's amazing, you know, and that's my story, and you don't know who that's going to inspire. So I'm like, be on your inspiration, do great things and keep positive.
I would say that it makes a lot of difference if, as I say, it is always about the bottom line. I'm afraid there's no getting away from it, except in those countries which value their arts a bit more value than this country at least, like in Germany, for example. But if you've got a market or if you've got backing, I was an exact contemporary. We were doing the same course. This man called Adebayo Ogunleze, who since recently discovered, returned to Nigeria. He's done very well. He's a billionaire. I believe he owns Gatwick Airport.
See, they don't tell you these stories, do you? Who knew a Nigerian would own Gatwick Airport? Hello.
Well, he's part of the consortium that does own it. And lately I discovered he's also a member of President Trump's Business Advisory Council. You know.
Us Nigerians, we get everywhere.
But the point I make is he took a strategic decision, went for it, and he's been vindicated. But when you have that kind of crowd, he's only on that council because he is a billionaire and obviously does have some influence. And if you have somebody like that, Abramovich can bankroll Chelsea, Stan Kroenke can bankroll Arsenal. I'm hoping that Bayo might bankroll me one day. It's if you simply appeal to what ought to be done, and if you don't have some sanction in the sense of the profit in so doing, the profitability of doing the right thing, if you see what I mean, then the right thing will probably not be done.
So Riz Ahmed recently spoke out about being again, giving the term being person in
It's a funny old term, isn't it?
It's completely unrepresentative, to be honest.
And I just hate the idea of minority. I'm not a minority, I'm a majority. That I would never call myself that, ever. Ever. And I don't think anybody else should.
So I guess maybe person of colour might be
Person of
more
ethnicity.
well, he spoke out about being in the media, and he said that seeing yourself represented on stage is like being told you matter, and kind of losing representation is first of all losing people to extremism, secondly kind of losing an expansive idea of who we could be, and thirdly losing out on economic benefits in terms of providing for a market. What are your thoughts on?
Absolutely, well done, Riz, I say. Most importantly, I can say when I was growing up, thank God for Oprah. She is everything. Not only are we touching identity, she was a black woman on TV where I wanted to be. Her status is powerful, the way she influences people. So I know I wasn't forgotten. If this woman could do this, my goodness, what can I do? And thirdly, money. One of the richest women in the world. I was like, right, so if she's gonna make $1 billion, come on, I'm gonna make my $1 trillion. Those three distinct points. You have to make sure that everybody can see what you're doing from whatever part of the world, country, whoever you are, so you, again, positively inspire someone to do something that they thought they would never possibly be able to do ever. That for me, I carry that such a great torch for that woman and any other woman of ethnicity who presented themselves on mainstream telly, because there were only a handful, and especially when I was growing up, and were doing what I wanted to do. Now, apart from that, I have many people who inspire me, men, women from all different places, but for me to see myself and have that visualization and dream in my head that I could do and be anything and I wanted to, it was because my fires and my passion were lit because of people like Oprah. And who's that woman who used to laugh? She used to laugh so much. There was a woman called, and she's still on telly, she used to cook.
Rusty
Lee, yes, Rusty Lee. Oh, she was great. And Downtown Judy Brown, who was on MTV. So when I saw on MTV, I'm like, I love this woman. She is everything. I knew I was going to work on there. End of story. That's what happens to me. And may I pray that I will be able to inspire other young girls who maybe just want to have a little bit more confidence in themselves, or want to work in television, or just create a business and be an entrepreneur. For me, I know that's what I'm doing every time I see a girl, regardless if she's black, white, Asian, it doesn't matter, you know. And then I do it for the boys as well. So you're hitting every kind of department ever. We all have that opportunity. If we keep silent on who we are and how great we are, then, you know, it's a shame on us. John, I think you're amazing. Don't you ever keep quiet, all right? So it's important.
No, I'm thinking, I went to see the Book of Mormon last week. It's funny, it's outrageous.
Yes.
It's outrageous. And at times you think, should I be laughing at this? You know, because the more, I mean, the Mormons are an easy target.
They are.
But they're sent to, the story is that they're sent to Uganda.
Don't give it away! Don't give it away!
No, it won't give anything away. But you know, there was, I think, some characters based on Joseph Kony's Lord's Redemption Army, they do the vilest things. They're vicious. They're violent. They want to force women to undergo female genital mutilation, or circumcision as they call it. And I was wondering about the casting of these roles, and whether how I think Trey Parker, the man who wrote South Park, is one of the authors of it, and clearly he's sending up an institution. And indeed a theatrical convention, because they have these song and dance routines of, you know, celebrating the most ridiculous positions and propositions. But then the depiction of these violent Africans with their AK-47s and cutlasses and machetes, you know, it's kind of plausible, but there are very few redeeming black faces on that stage, you know. And again, making a point that he's parodying two kinds of extremist positions, you know, the Mormons on the one side and these Africans on the other. And so it struck me that it's a pity that Roy Williams couldn't make it here, the playwright, because I'm sure he's very mindful of his responsibility, I suppose, to present fully rounded characters. I'm not saying all black actors need necessarily to be good and decent, you know, or to be Nelson Mandela or you know, Kofi Annan, just to be as a sort of corrective. But there is that sense that unless it's written by somebody who has that sensibility, there's always going to be the risk, if not the likelihood, that it's going to be a two-dimensional character. You know, most of the black characters in the classical, indeed the modern theatre tradition have been written by white authors. You know, Shakespeare and Eugene O'Neill, the Emperor Jones. I've gone blank, but there is, I think, a need for, I reiterate, good financial backing and black originators in the form of writing and perhaps in the form of directing as well. Without that, then these traditions will just perpetuate. You know, will carry on. They're dying out, but they will carry on longer than they need to.